Board games are tabletop games for 2 or more players. They have been around for a really long time. For example, board games were played in ancient Egypt, in ancient Mesopotamia, India, China, and by pre-Columbian civilizations. Often, board games use pieces that are moved or placed on a dedicated board. In competition games, the goal is typically to capture all of the opposing pieces or to reach the higher final score. Let's have a look at 3 types of board games and how we can use computer algorithms to solve them. Tic-tac-toe is a very simple board game. It is a 2-player game where each player takes turns placing markers on a 3x3 grid. The first player places an X on any square of the grid. The second player places an O on any square of the grid. Players alternate turns, placing their markers on any empty square on the grid. The first player to get the 3 of their markers in a row, this is horizontally, vertically or diagonally, wins the game. If all squares are filled and no player has 3 in a row, the game is a tie. As mentioned, this is a very simple game because of its small size. The players can quickly learn the proper strategy after having played a couple of games. We can easily evaluate all possible games. The fact that the board is symmetric makes this task even simpler. Several positions are identical. There are 138 terminal board positions. 91 of those are won by the first player, X, 44 are won by the second player, O, and 3 positions end in a draw. If both players play optimally, the game will end in a draw. Connect 4 is a 2-player game where the players take turns dropping colored tokens into a 6-row, 7-column grid. The winner is the player who first forms a horizontal, vertical or diagonal line of 4 of their Swan tokens. Because this game takes place in a significantly larger board than tic-tac-toe, it was long not feasible to solve it by brute force because sufficient computer power was not yet available. The winning strategy was found in 1988. The game can always be won by the first player when playing a perfect game. Checkers, or draughts, has more complex rules than the first 2 games we mentioned. Each player starts with 12 pieces on the dark squares of the 8x8 checkerboard. The pieces can move diagonally and jump over the opponent's pieces and capture them. The game ends when one of the players captures all of the opponent's pieces or when the players agree in a draw. This game has roughly 5 times 10 to the power of 20 positions, which is about 1,000,000 times more complex than Connect 4. In 2007, Schaefer and colleagues announced that they have solved the game. If both players make perfect moves, the game will always end up in a draw. For this, they were using dozens of computers running for almost 20 years. Whoa! We mentioned that some games are solved, so what is a solved game? In game theory, a solved game is a game where the outcome can be correctly predicted from any position, assuming that both players play perfectly. This means we will know who will win, who will lose, or if the game will end in a draw. There are 3 levels of solved games. Strong one has an algorithm that makes perfect moves from any positions in the game. Weak one has an algorithm where one player will win or draw against any possible moves by the opponent. And this one is from the beginning of the game. The third one, ultra weak level, shows whether the first player will win, lose or draw from the initial position, provided that both players play perfectly. Here, a perfect play is the behavior or strategy of the player that leads to the best possible outcome for the player, regardless of the response by the opponent. The games we mentioned in this video are solved games. Tic-tac-toe is simple. Because of a small size, either player can force a draw. Connect 4 is strongly solved. The first player can always force a win. In checkers, either player can force a draw with a perfect play. Checkers is also the largest board game that has been solved so far. Chess, as a game, has not been solved at this point. However, several endgames, when there are only some pieces on the board remaining, have been solved. Go has been weakly solved for 5x5 and 7x7 boards. However, classical Go is played on a board of the size of 19x19. We will return to chess and Go in the following videos. At the end of this unit, you will find several questions to test your knowledge. Here is one of the questions. Which game is the most difficult in view of possible moves? Is it tic-tac-toe, checkers, Connect 4 or Go? What do you think?